Our next presenter is another now close colleague of mine in this movement, many of ours, Gayle Jordan, who is the current executive director of Recovering from Religion. A former Southern Baptist, Gayle left the faith 12 years ago when her then teenagers began asking questions she could not answer. Her research led her and her children into the light of reason and rationality. Years later, she still feels the effects, both positive and negative, of that dramatic shift in perspective and attitude. It is this sympathy and compassion that drives her to reach out to help others navigate the emotional and physical process involved in leaving one's faith. Gayle is a co-founder of the Nashville Nuns Convention, also known as NanoCon, and Murfreesboro Freethinkers. In 2016 and 2018, she ran for the state senate in rural Tennessee as an open atheist, where she faced a profoundly unconstitutional attack on religious liberty. Gayle is an attorney and former personal trainer who is currently enjoying life in the Pacific Northwest close to her children. She blogs about life, endurance event training, and secularism at Happy, Healthy, Heathen. Ladies and gentlemen, Gayle Jordan.
Thank you, everyone. Can you hear me? I think I saw some thumbs up. Thank you for the invitation, for that kind intro. I'm so glad to be part of the good work that Black Nonbelievers is doing. Just a piece of trivia, the Black Nonbelievers 5th anniversary celebration was my very first event that I attended as the brand new executive director of Recovering from Religion. Has a really soft place in my heart for that. I've long been a huge fan of Mandisa. She has been a support group leader for Recovering from Religion for years. So congratulations to Mandisa and to the entire organization of Black Nonbelievers for this tremendously exciting milestone anniversary. I wish I was with you today. The pictures that you all have posted on social media is giving me life. So keep them coming. The friendly faces and the love that you're sharing with one another, it makes my heart pine for the time that we can all be together again. I am speaking to you today from my office loft in the Great Pacific Northwest, as Mandisa said, in my new home in Roseburg, Oregon. I've only been here for about 5 months. Before I moved here this summer, I lived in Tennessee for almost 30 years. So that leads me to my talk today. As Mandisa said, I ran for state senate in Tennessee 2 different times, once in 2016 and once in 2018, in a very rural and very red district in Tennessee. Tennessee's government is in the grip of a Republican supermajority and is in a whole world of hurt due to healthcare, education, the opioid crisis, you name it, we have it. Let me take a break and say this is a good moment to mention that both Black Nonbelievers and Recovering from Religion are nonprofits, and the political views that I'm going to share with you today belong to me alone. So my campaign in 2016 was routine and unremarkable. I was running against a very well-known and well-liked candidate. But my campaign in 2018 was quite different. That candidate had taken a position in the Trump administration, so the seat became what is known as an open seat. And that means that there are some advantages to having an open seat. It's a short election cycle. Not everybody knows about it. It's a race to get your voters motivated. And remember that my opponent was a kind of an unknown, not terribly interesting, not terribly dynamic kind of, you know what I mean when I use the word milquetoasty, wealthy, milquetoasty kind of a guy. So I had some advantages going into that race. However, it's important for you to know that the piece of my story that's critical to it is that I've been an out and vocal and visible atheist in my small town for about 10 years. So anyway, if you can remember back in time, we had a lot of midterm energy coming into 2018. And while my election was a special election and it wasn't in the November election of 2018, there was we had all woken up after the 2016 federal election. And so there was a lot of energy coming into that. Between that energy and between the fact that it was a special election and my not quite so interesting opponent, we in our campaign were leading in the polls up until about the last 2 weeks of the campaign. The other side, my opponents, panicked and they went on, the only thing I can call it is a religious freedom rampage. They engaged in some unconstitutional behavior. They had flyers, their social media, and finally, even a letter to every pastor in the district. This woman is an atheist and she's going to destroy Tennessee as we know it. There's a whole lot more to the story. You can find that online. But they were doing the usual attack on a non-believer's religious liberty, that I was immoral, a baby-eating, goat-worshiping heathen, bring it, whatever. And of course, you already know the end of the story, because Mandisa did not introduce me as a state senator. We lost. The pastors that had gotten that letter took that message to heart. They took it to the pulpit. They terrified their old white senior adult congregations, and some of them went to the polls and voted for the very first time because of the fear that was projected from the pulpit because of the message. And if Dr. Dent is still with us, I'm not looking at the panel, so I can't see that, but she would feel my pain if she heard me mention that after this gentleman was sworn in, at his swearing in ceremony, he was sworn out. Remember, it's a Republican supermajority. When he was sworn in, he was awarded a commendation for his protection of religious liberty. You knew that was coming. They have such a skewed view of what religious liberty is. It's religious liberty for them, but no one else. So that was a fun story, right? Does that make you want to run for office? Why in the hell am I even sharing it in the first place? Well, as I said, the whole story's on the internet. You can Google it if you want to, because there are some funny moments to it, but that's the story in a nutshell. But today I want to talk about the aftermath, and I want to talk about why, in spite of the humiliation of the loss, in spite of the attack on me personally, I want to encourage you to consider running for office. When I give this talk, I conclude the talk with talking about the 5 general takeaways, and I'm going to list the first 4, and then we're going to talk about the 5th one. That's where I want to spend our time. But in that loss and in that experience, my top takeaways, the first one is thousands of Christians voted for an out and visible atheist in my campaign in 2016 and 2018, because it is Tennessee, it's rural Tennessee. Even the folks on my side of the party are Christian. And so we had thousands of Christians voting for an out atheist. That's a big takeaway. The second one, we added to the national conversation, to the local conversation about atheists running for office. You've seen the poll, everyone's seen it, of the least trusted demographic. And we as non-believers, as atheists, as agnostics, as free thinkers, as heathens fall into that category. The third takeaway, and it might be my favorite, is that I got to meet so many fellow non-believers. And the ones that moved me the most were the ones that came up to me after an appearance, and they bent in and they whispered in my ear, I don't believe either, but these people are not out. There's not they would lose everything in their rural communities. And I understand that, and I feel their pain, but that was one of the highlights for me, was being able to meet some of these fellow non-believers in my little tiny rural district. The fourth takeaway is that we were trailblazers. We got to own a little piece of Tennessee history. It's no one else ever has to run as an atheist for state office in Tennessee for the first time. So we got to be trailblazers. But the last takeaway, and where I want to spend a little time today, is that we got to tell our story. I got to tell my story. We are often so mischaracterized. As JT found out when he did his dissertation, we are so, they tell our story for us. They describe our narrative. We are immoral. We have nothing to live for, my personal favorite. We are selfish and we don't care about other people. And then the ever-present, we just want to sin. Okay. So so often they tell our side of the story. And so when you run for office as an out non-believer, particularly in the South, particularly in a rural or red district, we get to tell that story every time. We get to dispel that myth every single time, every podcast, every newspaper interview, every appearance. I promise you, if you're running as an out atheist, that's going to come up, and it's going to come up every time. Every time I got to explain who I was and what I believed. Every time I got to explain the First Amendment. You would think that they know this, but as you can see from the events of the last couple of weeks, people have no concept of what the First Amendment is. Every time we get to explain what's important to us. Every time we get to explain why our lack of religious belief, why our humanism drives us to run. My particular expression that I used over and over and over again, that's a little hint for you. If you do decide to run for office, you kind of get a little tagline and you repeat it over and over again. But mine was that the well-being and the actual suffering of my neighbor is what moves me to act. It's what moved me to run. I want to say something. I know that running is not for everyone. I know that it simply may not be your personality. I often joke about it. I have a thick skin and a big mouth, and it worked for me to be able to run. I didn't mind the pushback. I didn't mind when all the distorted pictures of my face came out on those flyers. I didn't care that the lieutenant governor tweeted about me being the most dangerous woman he's ever seen in Tennessee in 40 years in politics. I didn't care about any of that stuff. I didn't take it personally. Bring it. If that's your opinion, speak up, say it. I wasn't afraid of it, but I know that everybody's not like that. I recognize that we have different personality types, but you might think of other ways that you can attach to a campaign. You can be a campaign manager. You can be a treasurer. You can be a volunteer. There are so many things you can do to attach to a campaign. So I understand that. And secondly, let me also acknowledge and recognize that running for office, just like every other effort for a person of color, is compounded exponentially, as is everything that is worth achieving. This is not something I have to tell Black non-believers, but my white brothers and sisters need to be reminded of this on a regular basis over and over again. So I recognize that. So I recognize the challenge for running for office, both because of personality and if you are a person of color. Having said all that, let me say that let's remember that our involvement in politics is non-negotiable. As if the prior 4 years weren't a constant reminder of that in such a real and personal way. So not only is this our civic duty and our obligation, but even as a member of a campaign, even as just a volunteer, you might be given the opportunity to explain why you do what you do to people who have no concept of why you could possibly be motivated to do good things if you don't love baby Jesus. And so it gives you the most unique opportunity that you'll ever have to be able to tell your story. And I'll also add that any office will do. School board, city council, road maintenance, proverbial dog catcher, anything that you want to, anything that will give visibility. Because, and here is if you've taken away nothing else from my talk, here is the heart of my talk. Visibility is everything. Mandisa has put herself on the line for years and years, because visibility is everything. Black Non-Believers is celebrating its 10th year anniversary because visibility is everything. So let me close. Remember when you were so relieved when the pastor finally said, and so in closing, so in summary, in closing, if you're considering running for office or helping with a campaign or being part of that, please get in touch with me. I have a little bit of inside baseball I'd like to share with you, and I'm going to drop a couple of hints to entice you to continue to encourage you to run for office. If you do choose to run for office, let me tell you this little inside secret. There is a tremendous amount of secular funding available to you. For example, I don't know if you all know this, I'm on the board of directors for the Free Thought Equality Fund. Attached to the center, it's the 501c4 that's attached to the Center for Free Thought Equality. And while there are certain restrictions on what money they can give, and it's limited to certain states and certain rules and all of that, they will happily broadcast your campaign to the entire membership of all of the secular people who are part of that. That is a tremendous resource, so don't forget about that. You also can take it. Let me see if I can say this nicely. You can take advantage of the controversy with the media. And what I mean by that is you can take advantage of stirring the shit. They're already going to be wound up about an atheist running for office. Lean into it. Bring it. Okay, guess what? I'm an atheist running for office. It will be a story. Also, if you find a volunteer, a dedicated volunteer to look for that, you'll find blogs and podcasts who love to cover stories like that. So it's a built-in piece of running as a non-believer in a very red district. I will caution you. You don't. It's a balance. You're not running not to win. You're not trying to lose the seat. The seat is important. We need those seats. We need them on the city councils. We need them on the school board, not because you're going to implement goat worshiping to your school board, but because people need your voice of reason and your non-religious approach as part of the governing process. That's the piece that we are so lacking. So don't run not to win, but understand that there are so many things that are important in addition to having the seat. Now, I think you all will be pleased to know, as I said, I was in conclusion. I've got a timer running. So if I've done this properly, I know I stand between you and a break and a little bit of coffee and a little bit of moving around. So if there are any questions, I'm glad to help answer those.
Thank you very much, Gayle. I appreciate you. And say hi to Elliot in the back for me. He's behind you. So we're gonna take some in-person questions first. If anyone has a question for Gayle, and then I'm going to find out if there are any questions from the virtual audience. Does anyone have any questions for Gayle in the audience? No one? Oh, come on.
I'm just curious, what was the worst thing that you weren't expecting that you got in your campaigns, the worst criticisms or comments that really hurt that you weren't expecting to be hurt by?
That's a great question. There were so many things. I don't mean to be so cavalier when I say, oh, the flyers didn't hurt my feelings and whatever, and I've got a thick skin. It's hard when you walk to your own mailbox and you pull out that, those big colorful flyers, and it's my face distorted to look awful. I don't care. I'm not a vain person. Everybody takes a bad picture, but they've got it distorted, and they have pulled quotes from a podcast that I have been on, or something that I've written in my blog, or something that I've said completely out of context. In my early days after having left religion, I probably was guilty of saying some things like religion is a force for destruction. I do believe that. I probably would have scrubbed that if I had known that. So all those words, when you go through your deconversion process, and part of my story was I had religious bona fides. I took my children to church every time the doors were open. And when I deconverted, when my children led me and we all came together out of religion, I went through an anger phase. I was frustrated for having exposed my children to that. They're all 4 adult freethinkers now, by the way. So I went through some anger. I was frustrated, all of the money and the time and the effort and the energy and all of that I'd put into church. And in my angry phase, I probably said some things that I probably wouldn't say now, particularly wouldn't say now as the executive director of Recovering from Religion, an organization that reaches out to folks as they're on their journey. So that surprised me, but they are relentless. They will find whatever you've got, they are going to find it, especially in this era of social media and, digital everything. So that was surprising to me. It surprised me that they did it at all. That this is the party of religious freedom, and for them to have done that so blatantly and so relentlessly was a big surprise to me. Thank you for that question.
We have 2 more questions here. The first is, for those who are interested in getting involved with Recovering from Religion from a psychology and counseling aspect, how does one do that?
Oh my goodness, great questions. I wonder if I had a plant in the audience that asked that question that gives me the opportunity to talk about Recovering from Religion. Recovering from Religion, we have a very simple mission statement. We provide hope, healing, and support to folks who are struggling with issues of doubt and non-belief. And we welcome with open arms anyone who wants to partner with us in that mission, whether you want to be a behind-the-scenes donor, whether you want to be a volunteer. Our volunteers are at work as we speak right now on the phones and and on the internet chat, helping people work through their doubts and their issues. There is a volunteer tab at our recoveringfromreligion.org website. There's also a volunteer tab, a donor tab. If you want to join us, we would love to partner with you. There is so much information at the website on who we are and how we operate. We happen to have in the audience today Dr. Daryl Ray. Daryl, you can wave if you're hearing me. He's the founder and the president of the board of Recovering from Religion. And as I mentioned earlier, Mandisa has been a support group leader for us for a number of years. So we would love for you to join us. If you'll visit our website, that's where everything is, and we'd love to partner with you.
Awesome. One final question is, how do you find out which offices are available to run for in your state?
Oh, what a good question. That's a good question. First, you can do the usual internet sleuthing. You can Google, find out when your elections are. There are some that sneak past that you could run for even without an opponent. They seem like they're not important, but what happens is if you enter into the ground level, let's say you're going to run for road supervisor for your district, which is seems like a nothing position, but you work there and you are part of maybe you establish a piece of legislation that you would like to see your city or your county pass, and you get your legs under you and you develop your public speaking and you learn how to work with other people, and then you run for the next office and the next office. I don't know that I would suggest running for state senate right off the top, but you can do that. But you can Google that. You can become involved in your local political party. That they'll know everything about when the elections are, what the cycle is, how long the term is, what the funding looks like, all of that. So connect with your local political party and that will give you the best source of information from that.
Okay, so actually there's one more question. Have you done presentations at churches or debates at churches? And if so, how were they received?
Oh my goodness. I would love to do that. I haven't ever really done that. I've never been invited to do that, and I haven't marketed myself in that context, but that to me seems like a wide open field. And you start with the liberal churches, you start with the progressive churches. They're the only ones that are going to have you anyway. You start with that. I have been a part of I've been on a Christian panel. I spoke at the Religion News Service. There was 4 pastors and me, and we were talking about the youth and something. And so I stood out like a sore thumb there. And then I've also been involved in some coffee shop level discussions with a really hippy dippy Christian group that wanted to bring in a non-believer. And so I've done I've done it on that scale, never on the scale of full blown church. And I would not consider myself a debater. The debate arena is not something that appeals to me quite as much as the sort of the panel area, because there's so many people that can do that have they study and they know the answers to all of those questions about all the philosophical arguments, all the fallacies, all that kind of thing. But what a great question. It's a wide open field for us to reach out to churches to be able to make our position known. And I think some churches would invite you and have you join them.
All right, thank you very much, Gayle Jordan.